Richard Florida was born south of the border in New Jersey. He was the son of a factory worker and went on to graduate with a PhD from Columbia University. He wasn't sold on settling down in the US of A, so he packed his bags and headed north with his wife Rana to give their future children the gift of Canadian citizenship. A decade ago, Richard Florida came up with the idea of the creative class and laid it all out in his bestseller. It refers to young, dynamic professionals who he said were key to an urban revival. But in his latest book, New Urban Crisis, he looks at how the same urban revival has carved huge divides in our cities between the haves and the have-nots. Florida is the city's director of the Martin Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto and a highly sought-after international speaker. In this city, there's people living two separate lives. There's such a divide. And you say that the first signal of thought that we saw here was the election of Rob Ford.
Rob Ford was the first expression of this kind of populism, this kind of anger and anxiety among real people.
When I get down to City Hall, the gravy train is over.
If Rob Ford could happen in a great, progressive, caring, kind city like Toronto, more and worse would follow. Still, I never expected, Donald Trump is not fit. He's not competent to be president of the most powerful nation on earth. So what we're seeing in the United States is it's a divide, much worse than we have here in Canada, and people are angry. People want to see a better future. And really, Trump is not so much a class divide. It really is a cultural divide.
Because I'm going to stop the gravy train for all these consultants and all of these people that are ripping off our country.
And the daunting statistic, if you look at the year 1970, 2/3 to 70% of people lived in a middle-class neighborhood. Whether they lived in New York or LA or Toronto or Vancouver, now it's like 40%, and that data is a little old. It probably is getting down to close to 1/3. So one of the big points of my book on the New Urban Crisis is the middle class has been completely eviscerated, and our societies and cities have divided into small enclaves of the privileged and the advantaged, and much larger spans of disadvantage. And I think that not only led to Rob Ford here, but that is really behind the rise of Trump and this backlash that we're seeing in England with Brexit, in France. Fortunately, it didn't win in France, but in Europe, this populist backlash is really the consequence of this great divide in our cities and in our countries.
I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
What do we do about it? There was a survey recently that people are $200 away from not being able to pay their bills in this city. Real estate is going up, and it's such an unnatural progression. What do we do?
Well, I think, and I hear it from parents, too. My kids, how are my kids ever going to afford to live in Toronto?
It's not even a dream anymore here.
No. One, we have to build more, and there's a lot of cranes in the sky here, and that's great. But a lot of that is luxury building. Lord knows we need better transit, and not just transit that connect our suburbs to the city, high-speed rail that make Hamilton. You could imagine with a high-speed rail, even Windsor, where Hamilton and Windsor, houses are affordable, where people could commute. And then finally, we got to build more middle-class jobs. If the middle-class neighborhoods are failing and the middle class is failing, it's because there's not good jobs. We decided as a society in Canada, the United States, and Europe that we would pay factory workers more so they could buy the things that they were producing. We can do the same with service workers, and these caring professions, the people who feed us and host us and take care of us in hotels and take care of our kids and our parents, they deserve more money. And they happen to be more women. They happen to be from ethnic and racial groups. But Lord, it's not just men, working class men who deserve a decent job. Everyone deserves a decent job. As an American born in America, I love my country. But with Trump in office, it creates enormous opportunity for Canada with Trudeau.
Right. In
this province of Ontario, we have an opportunity to actually turn the corner. It kind of fits us, being a
leader.
Loving, kind, leading society. It kind of fits our DNA. So I'm optimistic that we now realize where we are. We've reached this inflection point, and we can begin to build a more inclusive city and a more inclusive society.
Richard Florida, thanks so much for the insight.
It's great being with you.